second day of the National Ability Summit. I'm Sumit Chakrabarti, consulting editor of Mint. I am in my Bangalore home, wearing a black t-shirt with red trim. I have a painting behind me. I'm no George Clooney like Hardeep Rai introduced himself yesterday. Hardeep Rai of Kaleidoscope Investments. I tend to identify more with maybe Tom Hanks, his role in The Post, the movie about the Washington Post, which I loved. We kick off today with a session on assistive tech solutions, and we have a fabulous panel with us, an international panel, very diverse. Instead of introducing them all now and taking up time, what I'll do is I'll just draw them in one by one into the discussion and introduce them as we go. Starting with Michelle Plopper. She is the director of disability resources at Harvard University and an occupational therapist by training. Michelle, thank you for joining us. Will you introduce yourself and describe yourself pictorially and your setting and where you are?
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I was delighted to be invited to participate in this summit and in this particular panel. It's very near and dear to me. I'm Michelle Plopper. I'm an older Caucasian woman with shoulder-length brown hair and glasses, wearing a plum-colored shirt and glasses. And I'm sitting in my home office, which has been my home for way too long. And I go by the She series. And again, I pass back to you, Summit. Thank you for the invitation to participate.
Thank you, Michelle. Let me start by asking you about your work. What are some takeaways you can share with us from your efforts at Harvard University to create an accessible and hospitable working and learning environment?
Thank you for the question. I would say, number one, that it's a journey. And when we look at society at large, it's a long journey and complicated journey because accessibility touches all aspects of life, whether it's being in a dining hall to where we lay our head down at night to how we learn. So the best thing that I can say is we need to gather critical mass allies to help us along this journey, because we all know that disability touches all of us. It is the one identity that we all will be a part of or someone near and dear to us. So making that understood and always being true to the course and sharing that information, and about taking opportunities where we find it with our allies to make even small changes to let people to understand how this affects all of us as a society, as a culture. So I would say we need to chunk it out. We need to find opportunities. And as we're talking about in this particular panel, even though we as a world are undergoing very difficult times, it has been an opportunity for us to be able to fine-tune how we allow the virtual digital world to become more accessible. And people are very much more open to be making change because we are in a time of unprecedented change. So this is what we need to continue to do. And as I say, it's a journey, and no one does it all right. We have to be able to look to other people and have diverse people at the table in order to be able to make and discover best and promising practices.
Anything you can share from your specific learnings that maybe other educational institutions around the world can pick up from in terms of the challenges in actually implementing all this at Harvard, and and scaling it up as well?
I think that's a great question, because it depends upon what we're looking at and what opportunity and what barrier we're actually, I want to say, trying to address, is to chunk down the work. And for people who are unfamiliar, that it can seem overwhelming, and to be able to take small wins. One of the things I really like to do is, if you and I engaged in a project together, is to make sure you felt like a solid partner. And there's that partnership. And in the end, I want to celebrate the work and your reaching out and doing that work, so you can feel a part of it and you can feel that it's yours and that you made a difference and you are helping to change society, culture. And that is one thing I found, is that when you bring people along for the journey and they feel that they're a part of making the change, they're able to continue to make further change because they feel that they've been a positive force. And I think for other higher ed, it's being able to find those individuals and finding student voices, faculty voices, staff voices. And that's one thing we've been able to do, and our collective mass has become so much larger, and being able to make those changes that has been able to influence decisions. And we've done many things of instituting accessible procurement policies for digital tools, for what do we do for best practice versus live versus closed captioning. And so along the way, we've chunked out the work to be in small bites to be able to move it forward. But I would say it has to be very discreet, and you need to bring people along and chunk it out for them so they don't feel like it's just overwhelming.
Thank you, Michelle. I'll move on to the next speaker now. This is Christopher Patno, Head of Accessibility Programs at Google. He's had a long stint earlier at Apple, so he's a tech whiz. Hi, Christopher. Will you describe yourself really and your setting?
Sure. My name is Christopher. I'm wearing a white geometric shirt. My pronouns are he, him. I have gray hair, black headphones, glasses. I'm sitting in my office with a yantra behind me, giving me hope for some kind of knowledge. I came into this space by accident. I think it's important that everybody realize they have their own story. I was leading Google Play Music, and someone came into my team and turned on voiceover, and I heard button, 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 button. I asked, "What's that?" And she said, "Well, this is Google Play Music for someone who's blind." I said, well, that's stupid. How do they use it? And she said, well, that's why I'm here. And that was after 18 years of technology at Sony and Apple, I realized everything I had done had been done without thought of ability, disability, and accessibility. And I decided to make the change. So I took a Google 20% and ended up doing accessibility, and it turned it up into being my complete day job.
Thank you for that, Chris. Let me ask you specifically now about the work you're doing at Google. Mm-hmm. How can Google products, Google is something that everyone connects with deeply all across the world. How can Google products be integrated with efforts by innovators to create better, more affordable assistive tech solutions than some of the legacy ones, which, many philanthropists keep backing the legacy applications rather than, kind of better innovative possibilities? So could you take us through a few examples?
Yeah, I think the interesting opportunity is to break apart the old-fashioned devices that we're used to having, like AAC devices. There's no reason somebody have to have a dedicated AAC device if you could use say your Android phone or iOS phone, and have the functionality that's very similar. An example of us doing this, we've recently shipped a product called Action Blocks, which allows you to create pictures on your screen, and you press a button and it triggers an action from the Google Assistant. So you can have a button that says, order me a pizza, or call me a ride, or turn on the lights, or move my bed. But recently, we've announced a partnership with Tony Dynavox, and we actually have brought in the PCS symbols that people who use AAC devices are used to seeing, and we now embed that into our application. So someone who's used to using the traditional legacy style of devices can use our product to help them make their lives that much better. And some of the efforts we need to do is sort of imagine the future with a different set of constraints. We don't have to, because of technology is advancing so quickly, things become smaller, things become cheaper, things become faster. And what we need to do as technologists is to make sure that we build them in a secure and safe and private way, so everyone's privacy is respected. And we build these technologies in conjunction with people in the community, because without people helping us understand what the real problem is, we're never going to solve the right one. So I think that's the important thing. The integration has to be done with technology as it advances. We break our imagination or expectation of how things used to be, but we design these things in collaboration with people of the community.
Thanks for that. And this is something I think the assistive tech community would want me to ask, which is, not just the Google products which are already out there, but what can you tell us about what's coming, what's in the pipeline, some of the exciting new products that the assistive tech community in particular can look forward to in the coming year maybe?
That's not a fair question. I can't tell what we're doing. That wouldn't be right. But what I can share is, if you look at the work we've done to date, you'll see some significant advances using machine learning, artificial intelligence in a couple of different areas. And I think it's reasonable to extrapolate farther advances. For example, Live Transcribe is an application on Android, which provides transcription ability, automatic speech recognition in over 80 different languages. And this technology is based off the Google Speech API, as anyone has access to these things. So we're using the same technology that anyone who wants to use these APIs can. So someone could take these tools that we have, this platform, and build something on their own. So this ASR technology is a really exciting one, and I expect to see some really significant advancements on it, especially as we take these data models and shrink them so they can run on device. So now in our latest version of Android, we have a thing called live caption. So someone can actually have a video, say from Facebook, and it didn't have captions. We will create captions for you on device securely, no data connection, at least in English for now. We'll be expanding different languages, but we can create captions on device for you. And now with the latest version of Android, you can actually do this for phone calls. So if a friend of mine who is deaf has actually had a phone call with his doctor for the first time, because he reads what comes in, and he himself is verbal, he could speak back. So he's had his very first phone call with his doctor just about 3 weeks ago. So these technologies get really exciting.
And do you have a team there, or do you have a process by which you're able to support people who might run into some things that the APIs don't support? I was talking to an entrepreneur yesterday, and he is developing something around two-way communication, where you convert sign language to text, and then vice versa. So I think he is working with TensorFlow. Now, now if you want to make that device agnostic, you might run into issues here and there. Now, how do you work with a team at Google to resolve issues such as that?
It depends on the nature of the problem. If there's a problem with TensorFlow, we have developer advocates and developer relations folks who are dedicated towards TensorFlow. if you're working with Google Cloud APIs, we've got dedicated partner engineers and partner managers for Google Cloud. So it depends on the problem that you're trying to solve. I can't give you a one-stop shop to give you all the answers. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Moving on now to the next speaker, Mohan Sundaram. Mohan Sundaram is here with me in Bangalore. He is the founding director of, we're speaking to Mohan Sundaram next. So I think this is Pranav Desai. I'll just wait for the backend team to switch to Mohan Sundaram.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, there's Mohan.
Yeah.
Hi, Mohan. Good morning. So Mohan Sundaram is the founding director and CEO of Artilab Foundation, which recently launched a startup incubator in Bangalore, which is unique because it focuses only on assistive tech solutions. Mohan, will you describe yourself pictorially and your setting?
Yeah. So I am wearing a shirt with light green stripes. Much of my hair is turned white with a few spots of black, giving me a salt and pepper kind of hair, and a fully white beard. The beard has grown far more white than my hair on my head. Whatever little is there on top of my head, that is. I am wearing a spectacle. I'm sitting in my home office room, and yeah, so I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy at the age of 16. I am wheelchair bound, and I have been an entrepreneur, a tech entrepreneur, largely in the IT space, and I've been in investing space. I've been in the venture capital space, and I also have spent significant number of time in the disability sector with NGOs. I am now the president of a federation of NGOs dealing with disability in Karnataka called Disability NGOs Alliance. And it's my disability that drew me to the disability field, and I found that there was very little being done for assistive tech within India, which prompted me to look at how to build this. I started this incubator, which is the first of its kind in the world, because there is no other incubator at the time when we started that was focused on disability as a theme. So that's what we do. So we not only look at assistive technologies, we look at assistive technologies, rehabilitation technologies, we look at infrastructure technologies, because they're not necessarily, assistive is more personal. There are infrastructure devices and also preventive solutions, tech solutions to prevent disability. That's the canvas that we handle.
So let me hear a little more about the specific experience of selecting your first cohort of startups for this incubator program, which will kind of give us an idea about the entrepreneurship in this space that you're seeing in India and Bangalore.
Okay, so we are now close to 2 years old. So not as recent as what one would think, but 2 years old now. We have gone through about 3 rounds of selection of teams to get incubated with us. About 60 to 70% of the teams are typically ones that come directly out of college. Okay. Now about 40% of them are ones who have been working in some space, have looked at this problem and come out to build something. The other profile that we have found is that the people who come into the sector are mostly innovators, but not entrepreneurs. We are more innovators than entrepreneurs, right? And being an entrepreneur, apart from being an innovator, is also a very important aspect of trying to build impact in this particular space, right? And if you look at the assistive tech or the rehab tech space, there are outside of the digital products that one looks at, which Chris was talking about. There are a lot of most of the products are physical in nature, so it takes a long time to build, prototype, test, and all that. This is like the biotech space. It takes about 3 to 4 years for you to build a product to be ready to market, and so it needs longer incubation periods. And most of the innovators and entrepreneurs have to be first coached on it's a long run that you have to be in for. It's not as if something will happen tomorrow, because everybody sees news saying so and so got funded within 6 months and 8 months and stuff like that, right? Here in 6 to 8 months, you don't get to do even 1/10 of what anybody else will get to do in another sector, right? So there's a lot of alignment that needs to happen from people who come into this space. So that is one aspect about selecting people. The second is about how should it be different in terms of our engagement with them, right? One is the length of engagement, which would typically will be about 3 to 4 years of incubation and maybe about 8 years of engagement, active engagement. The second is that most of the entrepreneurs who come into the space lose time trying to do prototyping, a lot of time. Right? So you must have good prototyping facilities and technical capabilities to be able to turn around prototypes as fast as you can. So we are looking at saying, can we turn 3 design iterations over in 18 months' time, which is fairly aggressive. And to do that, you need a lab and a very well-conceived and well-provisioned lab, I may say. The other aspect is this sector does not, unlike other sectors, does not have a very developed system of production, of channels that take products to market, of people who also understand market models. So what I mean by this is, so I am a mentor at the NSRCL at IIM Bangalore for the last 10 years, and I've mentored about 1,000 entrepreneurs there. And I see the regular startups that come for incubation, right? So when you look at those kinds of businesses, they are direct businesses, meaning the person who is benefited by the product is the one who pays for the service of the product. That's what I call as a direct business. And that is what 85% of them are. Whereas in our space is all indirect model. The one who uses the product, the one who pays for the product are invariably completely different. So how do you operate under such business models? How do you build such businesses under such models is something that a lot of work needs to be done. It is not very well developed as business models in India yet. So we still have to do some experimentation along with the ventures in that space.
So it's twice as difficult, right? I mean, firstly, you're dealing in a space that is quite rudimentary in terms of developing business models in India. And you're working with people who are coming fresh out of college. Usually it takes 1 or 2 iterations of entrepreneurship to get the hang of what makes, like you said, an entrepreneur rather than just an innovator. So, how do you look at that? Is it something that you're getting engaged with at an earlier level in academic institutions to be able to, start building that mindset early on?
So one is to try and build the mindset. Second is to try and, so I think trying to build the mindset is subsequent to the fact that somebody is committed to the sector. And we won't know about commitments till they actually make the choice post their graduation.
Yeah.
Right?
But over there, I mean, what I'd like to point out is I think for many, engineering students, you tend to, pick up an application like that to really maybe learn about ML and AI, you pick up, and you may not necessarily be committed to, like that kind of a 10-year commitment that you are making if you
Yes.
really want to go deep into it. So how do you decide, whom to back and whom not to?
So
In this,
I'm part of multiple competitions that are run for college students where they come and present their ideas with prototypes. And there are people who bring up assistive technology prototypes there. So we identify those who have a preliminary interest in being in this sector because they've done something using assistive tech. And we engage with them and try and coach them into what is required to be in this sector. That's a far more focused approach than to do a carpet bombing, like going to every academic institution trying to teach them what it takes to be an entrepreneur in the IT space.
let me now bring in, thank you for that, Mohan. Let me now bring in Pranav Desai, and he will actually, talk to us from the user point of view, because he is the founder of, he's based in Los Angeles. He's the VP, he's a VP at NTT Data, but here he is joining us in his capacity as the founder of Voice of Specially Abled People, VOSAP, which has nearly 1 lakh volunteers. He told me this morning. Pranav,
8600.
you sorry,
8600, not 1 lakh.
nearly I said. So, Pranav, will you describe yourself pictorially and your setting?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak today with panelists that we have. Thank you to Arija also for this opportunity to bring everybody together, because this is what very important, I believe. So like you said, I'm talking right now from Los Angeles. I'm in my home office. I have wear a light blue shirt with a dark blue jacket with glasses. Still I have black hair. And the background here is Voice of Specially Able People banner, because that's the foundation that I started before 4 years. And definitely, as you can see on the background, there are multiple logos. So we have Disability Inclusion Index, DII, that we have for promoting inclusion of people with disability. We have WhatsApp Art from Heart, which is basically promoting inclusion by touching people's heart on the subject of disability. We have a WhatsApp mobile app, that is another logo, as you can see, which is multi-purpose, but primarily it's a public utility app for accessibility. So that is my background here on the screen. And yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Pranav. You're also a polio survivor. So let me start you off by, if you can share some of your personal challenges in, overcoming polio and building a very successful international career, and now giving back to the specially abled community.
Sure. So like you said, I'm a polio survivor, had a polio at the age of 4. So how I could be where I am today, frankly, it is because of assistive device. You call it, glasses are also assistive device, wheelchair is also assistive device, always not machine learning and AI. I, in my case, work with the braces, calipers. And it's important for people to understand that because of those calipers, investment that my parents made, at that time, I had up to jacket, so pelvis belt, jacket, and both the legs. But that kept me in a proper shape and allowed me to be mobile. And that's the reason I could do education, electronics engineering, MBA, compete in the corporate world here with Nippon Telegraph Telephone NTT Data for last 14 years. And very interestingly, America is very accessible relative to India. So I have again seen that how assistive technologies like power wheelchair, if I have to go to the park or somewhere, or I have a car with a conversion that again I can take my power wheelchair into the car, it yields and all that. It's very interesting. From day one, when I came in 99, I had a car with hand control ready. So those type of fittings or enabling devices, it's a huge market here, obviously. And that's where I was very inspired that, to unlock the potential. I'm vice president of sales and have traveled, obviously, all these years, many cities and countries also worldwide as a working for a multinational company. How could I do that? Because everything is accessible and I have, all the freedom of renting a car with hand control and all that. So I'm just going a little bit on mobility side or locomotive side of assistive devices. That's my story. That if a person with polio on both the legs can be head of sales for multinational company, which is sixth largest in the world. That is my full-time job, by the way, uh, for North America. That says something that, person with disability is capable. What is required is equipping them, providing them the infrastructure or devices. That's led me to start Voice of Specially Able People, where we are big time involved into making the difference in 360-degree advocacy and grassroots activities.
So that's a good point to bring up, something a little more specific about the voice of specially abled people. One of the things that innovators of, assistive solutions face is in gaining access to the community, gaining access to the market. So what is WhatsApp able to do in helping create demand for accessibility solutions?
You know, I look at it as a very infancy stage of the whole industry, right? As of now, only 1 out of 10 person with disability has an assistive device. That means 90% market is untapped. As per WHO, 1 billion people today are people with disability and expected to be 2 billion by 2030. That's a really double digit growth for next 30, 40 years if the trend the way it goes, because it allows to enable people to make people functional instead of them being on welfare because of not functional. With assistive devices, they are going to be functional and a taxpayer and live life with dignity. So this requires tremendous amount of advocacy. So Voice of SAP is creating demand by doing advocacy with various forums. For example, Niti Aayog. We work with Government of India. We work with various academic institutions like Gujarat Technology University. We launch innovative innovation challenge for the engineering students. So idea is that create a demand, talk to the industry people like Gujarat Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Startup Committee. We have talked to them that how innovation can be done in the college, like we see here in CSUN, California State University at Northridge, nearby my house. Those type of models should take to the market with industry's participation. When that can happen, when the advocacy is done, kind of selling the concept that there is a market, there is a demand, and that is right thing to do. So that is one part of it. Second part of the demand creation is that government should be spending a lot more, because like if government makes certain rules, it converts into the demand of the products. So that's where we work with Government of India also in multiple ministries and all that, but primarily uh, on the policy making. For example, Niti Aayog, we had several meetings and we are working towards creating a comprehensive policy that how can India be the leader to not only make the people of India with disability, whoever has disability, more functional, but look at it as a market opportunity, because worldwide there is a need for more affordable assistive devices. And how can we make that happen with more and more innovation that leaders like Mohanji is doing? That's where we have to connect the dots. So that's the second part of creating demand, that government resource allocation for this type of activities. And there are many things that government is doing, I'm sure, and that needs to be always done more. And the third part of demand is that show the results exactly on the ground. So we are the donations that we receive, we have enabled so many people in India with, and we have stories to tell. So that's where the demand will be more, visible. That okay, if a person with hearing impairment, child with hearing impairment, got a hearing device, he starts speaking. There's this data, and this you can show. If somebody has visual impairment, and we have so many such examples that we give kind of wings to their aspirations, where assistive device, just $100 assistive device, many cases like Daisy Player, but that college girl is now talking that I want to be going to civil services. I want to be university first. So that's kind of the energy, positivity, enablement, dignity is possible. So the demand has to be created right there by you know uh, bringing resources to the community, and that's where our volunteers and our supporters, we are trying to bring the overall solution in a way: policy, innovation, commercialization, and grassroots feedback that this type of device is working, this type of device is not working, this is the demand kind of it, so we can give feedback to the entrepreneurs and innovators.
Thank you for that, Pranav, a detailed answer. At this point, we have just passed the halfway mark, so I'd like to invite all the panelists. If you have a question for one another, if you just raise a hand, we can go with your questions rather than mine so that it becomes more of a discussion. Anybody has a question for any other panelist, please raise a hand. Pranav, please go first.
Okay. I have a question. I mean, I have several questions, but definitely Google has been leading in this assistive technologies. And we have developed actually the mobile app, which is obviously using Google Maps and the GPS and all that. We have tried to develop machine learning solution for accessibility, and we have been successful with 70% accuracy. That's not correct. We need 95%. So we need ton of data. Probably there is an interface that we can talk offline later on, but how can we make sure that accessibility information, we do the grading of accessibility, rating of accessibility? Has Google done any specific on that aspect? I know Google has done a lot of things on social circles and letting people do something, but any machine learning related initiative you think should be done? Or because we have kind of done it, but looking at like we have 16,000 places we have mapped out. Our goal is to go to million. Is there a possibility to see how we can make it happen? Because that will be very helpful to the community.
I'm not sure machine learning is the entirety of the problem. I think one of the biggest problems, using maps as an example, is getting ground truth, getting the data on the ground that is accurate. And that's not a machine learning problem, that's a people problem. How do we make sure that, how do we crowdsource this information so it's broadly available? We've recently announced and shipped in the US, starting the US, that we want to, and a couple other countries in Europe. I'm sorry, it's getting late and my brain I can't remember the exact countries, but we're broadening out this concept called accessible places, where we actually have accessibility information provided by stores and people who visit these places and say, does it have an accessible bathroom? Does it have stairs that allow, do you need to climb stairs to get in? And provide information that allows someone to make a choice if this is a place that they want or can go or not. Eventually, one would imagine this information could be wrapped into your trip journey. You say, I need a wheelchair, and we will end someday. One would imagine you could take this information and have it be part of the process that creates a specific journey. This isn't something that exists today, but the more of this data that we have, the better chance we have of making that possible.
And again, what we try to do is that pictorially, with pixel-based logic and machine learning. So we try to rate the at least external, whatever street view and the pictures that you have, do that, rating, whether it has ramp or not, whether it has a pipe railing to hold. Those things we have done, and so many scenarios we have kind of figured out. But then what we are looking at is that, yes, what you are talking is people should give feedback. But if there is a need of the hour is to get it out in millions of places being rated by machine learning, and then let people start commenting back, because that way probably this can be expedited. That's what we think that, because going into, again, every problem has a different solution. I think that at a macro level, if we start at a high level mapping, what we see from outside, good start, because that way it will bring lot of changes. And we are seeing that in the 16,000 places that we have mapped in city of Ahmedabad as a prototype. It is working. I mean, it's now a public utility app. Collector himself is going after buildings which are not accessible. So at least that model we can look at, probably offline also with you, Chris, but I see some integration.
I've reached out to you on LinkedIn. Please feel free to contact me, and we can see what's there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pranav and Chris. Anybody else in the?
I have a question for Michelle.
Yeah, please go ahead.
There's a lot of work that you're doing in Harvard, and one of the places, most education institutions in India are not accessible particularly, right? And it's not just about accessibility of the space. It is also to do with accessibility of educational material, teaching pedagogy methods, and so on and so forth, that will give this person with a disability a level playing field with anybody else. And while physical accessibility is something that has to do with space, for visually impaired or speech and hearing impaired candidates, there's a lot of work that also needs to be done on the content and the delivery mechanisms. Now, have you in any form documented your experiences that others could use to adopt? Do you have, let's say, a template of what a standard education institution must do to address the following disabilities? Have you sort of tried to collate such a document?
We do, but not in one particular document, is that we work very closely with the teaching and learning initiatives. And what that does is, from a digital perspective, because we're all virtual right now, it talks about what are the World Wide Web standards on accessibility, as far as basics, even as far as color contrast, as far as how to participate, even to be in a Zoom meeting, of, making sure your lips are seen, not being looking away. So we go from basics to etiquette, to using, just as we prepared for this meeting, of talking about taking turns, how to let students know in advance as far as their participation. We have an Assistive Technology Center in particular just for students that converts materials into the format that they need. So if someone is a Braille user, all of the materials from that syllabus are gotten by that particular team, and they're converted into the format that the student needs to use. So, and it sounds very disjointed with what I'm saying, because sometimes it feels very disjointed depending upon how the student comes forward. And what we really do encourage from the very beginning, that the student makes known what their needs are. And as the student makes their needs known, then there is someone in each of the schools, say the law school versus the education school, to make sure that the right resources are tapped into. And it's always evolving. None of this is ever done. As we all know, it evolves as time goes on, depending upon the need. And so materials are converted for the students. Faculty, we offer opportunities for them to learn how to interact with students and the curriculum. We just did a whole, and even on my website, There's a document that we just developed on inclusive curriculum and on teaching for anyone, even if you were doing a presentation, to be able to prepare to offer a format, because people only know what they know. And when Christopher was sharing the first time he heard, and that mine was heading 1, heading 2, and realizing that things aren't built accessible. And that's why I said earlier, it's really important to educate and develop collective mass, because we only know our lived experience, most of us, and people don't understand what barriers they're creating. So we need to teach people what the barriers are. And it's the same with faculty. Might be extremely talented and knowledgeable, but they know it from their lived experience, not from what it's like for someone who has a respiratory problem or a visual problem. So we need to provide those opportunities and the resources to engage them and for them to direct the material. But I would encourage anyone to start by looking at our website, which is accessibility.harvard.edu, because it is an evolving journey, and I'm definitely available to speak with anyone further, because there's so many pieces to this. There's the physical environment, there's the virtual environment, there's the preparation, and we all know, and I listen to your work, all your work, which I applaud, is all of this is easier when it is built from the front end and not after the fact, because we know that whether it's a document to read, whether it's a motor vehicle, to add and adapt it afterwards is a lot more work, it's a lot more expensive. And I would encourage everyone that as we all go forward in our journey is to make sure that the decision makers at the table are diverse, because diversity at the table from the front end of design is what's going to get us to be able to develop something more inclusive, because we all benefit whether or not that we have a particular impairment, but it gives us a choice. So it's a long-winded answer, Mohan, but it touches all pieces of the experience.
Okay.
I have one more question for Michelle from the audience. This is from Akshay, who wants to know about Harvard's interest in participating or partnering with Indian universities and organizations for research on disability.
I would definitely say, as you know, we are a research institution, and I would say yes, there's many people that I know at the different schools that are very interested, whether it's education or medical, and in developing and discovery of more and improved ways to be able to engage all members of the community. Because this work, again, as I said earlier, is really about all of us and how do we build a better world for all of us. So there are individuals there that I know are very dedicated and passionate about this work.
I have one other question from the audience, which perhaps Chris would take. When we talk about disabilities, usually most people are focusing on physical disabilities. What can you tell us about assistive tech solutions for mental disabilities?
So these often are the hardest things to bring to life and have them be useful. So much of this has to do with understanding the community and picking the segment of the community that you want to work with. There's such a broad group from the ASD, the autistic system disorders, all the way through dyslexia and everything in between and things even beyond them. I think the hardest thing to do is to pick the right category of disability you want to solve, and bring in the experts, bring in people of the community, bring in trusted experts, and figure out what you want to solve and how you want to solve it. I mentioned action blocks earlier. This is our first foray into building products for people with cognitive disabilities. And it's not the last, because this is such an important thing for us to be able to provide. And we think that we have something to offer given the technologies of like Google Assistant, speech access, the ability for speech recognition, and things like that.
Thank you for that, Chris. That question was from Anjani Sharma. I have a question for another audience question, perhaps for Pranav. This is about, from Ishika Gupta, who wants to know, specific communities who benefit from assistive tech solutions. So let me just broaden that. If you could give us an idea about, what are the imperatives for creating assistive tech solutions? What is the demand for this? I think you touched upon this earlier, but if you could elaborate on the opportunities which are not being tapped and, people who are not being served.
I mean, across the spectrum, what we have figured out, at least understood, is that affordability is very, very big issue. And that's why very important to focus on innovation, whether it's a, motorized product or software product or hardware product. But even in America, I have seen a girl example. She's PhD, non-verbal, everything with her assistive devices. She will type and do amazing work. But the expenses for her to have those consumables for that product is so expensive. Why can't we make a mass production and have hundreds of at least PhDs, not one, who can afford living here in a very nice neighborhood? That's where I think the innovation. So all constituents, I think the demand is probably in multiple places. But if we go for the basic thing by population data, visually impaired and locomotive impaired are the biggest kind of population which generates the demand because of the sheer population. And there is a very good, return on investment also. If you have certain products that can, enable them to do certain things, there's a very large market. If you develop a nice app or a product, and that we all know all that, but at least I would say that youth or the children who are very tech savvy, they all should have this tablet. Doesn't matter, because a person with disability doesn't need to go to school. What COVID-19 unfortunately has, but always there is a blessing in disguise. There is no need to go to school for a student with disability. For a person with disability, there is no need to go to workplace. So that means a lot of technological solutions for educating the students. There's a huge market, I think. So because right now all these studies or these products are available digitally, but are they, further enhanced for, visually impaired or hearing impaired students? So study from home. So I think those type of devices like tablets or Daisy player or the smartphone. Yeah, Chris, these are the things that I think very huge demand to mainstream the youth. At least that's what I think. Children.
Michelle, would
If-
you like to add to this?
Yes, I definitely would. And I'd also like to comment on Christopher's question, is that as far as going back to the fact of people with invisible disabilities, is that we need to really integrate what accessible technology we even have now into the way we are modeling in this particular conference, sign language, the captioning, because these are tools that benefit everyone. So if I had an issue, an attentional deficit, not only can I hear what's going on, I get the benefit of the captioning, where English is a second language. It helps me to be able to fully participate. If I'm someone who had a head injury and I had a hard time looking at the screen. I could have a blue screen or a different type of screen to be able to allow me to participate. So talking about the cost of equipment is that as we make these technologies more mainstream, we drive the costs down. We just need to have the right people at the table while we're developing them and to be able to decide what to market, because we all benefit. And I'm benefiting from reading the captioning myself and looking at our sign language interpreter is extremely descriptive, and I'm gaining from her also during this session. So mainstreaming what we're doing into everything that we do will help drive the price down. And that is something that I know people personally in my own life that didn't have technology, and what a struggle it was for them to become professionals because they had to work twice as hard as I did. And so we owe it to the people we know, to society, to be able to make this technology more mainstream.
Thank you for that, Michelle. I would like to actually bring Chris also into this. Chris, what can you tell us about how Google can help make assistive tech solutions more affordable and widely accessible?
I think what needs to happen is we need to understand the balance between cost and the cost of product and the things like connectivity. So for example, if you want to use computer vision, somewhere the compute needs to exist somewhere. Whether you have it on device, if you have an expensive device with a powerful processor, you can do these things locally. But if you want a cheaper device, then you could offload these things into the cloud. But then you have to have connectivity. So one of these things that needs to be done is finding the right balance between power and compute and connectivity is one way really to bring some of these latest technologies, these machine learning technologies, and make them cheaper. So speech to text is relatively cheap from a compute perspective, and we can do this on device. Computer vision is much harder, and you either need, if you want to have it in a realistic amount of time, you want to have a powerful processor, or you offload it. So what we can do is make sure all of our products are efficient and as small as possible, so you can run them on devices as much as possible, and then run them on lower end devices.
Sumit?
Mohan?
Yes, Mohan. Thank you, Chris.
I'll just pitch in here. A couple of points. One is, somebody asked how big is the market and what kind of assistive devices are required. Now, assistive devices, I think roughly 10 to 15% of the assistive device demand is digital in nature. 85% is physical devices, right? So we should not, that's a larger part of the market, number one. WHO says there is 15% disability of population. It roughly breaks up as 3% geriatric disabilities, 3% intellectual and cognitive disabilities, and the balance 8% is between locomotor, speech and hearing, and visual. About 1.5% is visual impairment, and the speech and hearing and locomotor is equally divided. Now, many of these things are not very apparent because you don't get to see them. 70% of the disabled stay in rural India. The people don't come out of homes if they're disabled, so you don't get to see them, right? So that is one part. So that's as far as somebody asked. And another statistic is Alimco is somebody that manufactures prosthetics and assistive tech devices. Whatever they sell in a year does not even cover 2% of the potential population. Okay. The other question is, how do you make assistive tech affordable? Right. Now, our thesis, and which has been well borne out so far as India is concerned, I'm not talking for the whole world, but so far as India is concerned, is when you say affordability, typically an Indian customer can afford only 1/20th or 1/15th of what a Western world customer can pay. Okay, whether he buys it himself or somebody else buys it and gives it to him, right? So you need to innovate to build products at about 1/10 or 1/15th of their costs. Secondly, they should also give importance to what is appropriate. What is built in the West is not necessarily appropriate for India. And I would say in 80% of cases, it is not appropriate. Non-digital products are not appropriate. I'm one who's had that myself. I have a scooter, personal mobility scooter at home, and I go around my colony. There's a 4-inch speed breaker on the road, and this device cannot cross because the ground clearance is 2 inches. That works in the US, that works in Europe, not in India. Right? So the only way to meet these cost envelopes, as I would call them, is to innovate afresh. Take the same idea, take the same problem, innovate afresh to a certain cost envelope, and that is possible. Examples, you have braille note takers in the US that cost about $3,500 to $4,000. Perkins is the most well-known brand. In India, we have 4 companies that are building it at an end user price of $350 with far greater features than what Perkins has. Okay. A good, fully functional K3 level prosthetic leg, say from Autobok or somebody, costs about 7.5 lakh rupees, 750,000 rupees. Indian innovation using materials which is not carbon fiber is available at 50,000 rupees and gives the same K3 level mobility. There are multiple examples like this where you can build products at those cost envelopes if you innovate afresh. And that is one of the key themes that we are pushing through for innovation. And we've been reasonably successful in being able to bring out products that meet the functional requirement and the affordability requirement for the Indian market. I think it will be, may not be the West. For digital products, you can take it to the Western world. But otherwise, there are countries that are very similar to India. ASEAN, Africa, Latin America have similar contexts and needs. So if you build such products here, you will be able to take it out to those countries and find good market for these products in those countries.
Thank you for that, Mohan. I think we are out of time, so I'll just take one last question that I'd like each of the panelists to respond to briefly. Starting with Michelle, what part does clarity of government policy play in supporting assistive tech solutions, and how can you influence that?
I would say government policy lays the foundation and gives us the mandate to everyone, not just higher ed, but to the country, is providing accessibility is of value and is important. How that actually happens is different in different environments and it evolves over time, but it does say that it is important to be accessible, and these are the basic requirements. And we've been talking a lot about vision and hearing and mobility, and we have very clear guidelines about what is effective communication and what is physical access. And digital is always evolving. It's the most evolving area. And thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Michelle. Pranav, would you like to talk about that in the Indian context?
Yeah, I think in US, our volunteers, our youth volunteers, we conducted 15 projects. We are also working right now with UC Berkeley on data sciences department. Lot of research for data-driven advocacy. So addressing the issues that we are talking here, demand part, business case. So one Northwestern team, students, undergraduate, did a very good research on what is the business case for nations to invest, so the policy making inputs. So from all of that, we definitely are looking for taking this to India also with universities to have research projects and programs on innovation, on market analysis, on multiple areas. We really need to collect more data in India, in addition to other things, obviously, that we need to do on ground. But that is one of our WhatsApp collegiate is very focused on research so far in America. We are looking forward to take it to India also.
Thanks, Pranav. Chris, anything to comment on how clarity in government policy helps?
I think as Michelle said, it provides a mandate that is easy to reference. There's many things that drive people to work in accessibility. We don't do it for the money. We do this because there's lots of reasons that are usually personal, but different people are motivated by different things. Some people it's a competition risk. For some people it's because it's the right thing to do. And for other people it's because it's the law. So I think the clearer the laws are, the more precise the laws are, but also how they're enforced is so it's not just the clarity of the law, but it's also the enforcement of the laws is what really helps drive people doing what's expected.
Thanks, Chris. Mohan, if you could, as the last answer to this session, give us the Indian context. If you could give us one or two gray areas and the need for clarity in government policy, in helping create and support assistive tech solutions.
Sure. So I think the first step that has happened is for the Rights of People with Disability Act to be passed in 2016. Without a framework under which the disabled can demand their rights, nothing really happens, and that's the foundation. But it has to be followed up with implementation guidelines, which every ministry or every area has to form and publish, and that has not happened. Say, for example, the Ministry of Transportation should publish transportation guidelines. As part of the rights, I have a right to travel anywhere I want. That's part of the act. But then, what is the sort of facility that must be available for people with disability to travel? The detailed notifications and the guidelines have to be drawn by each ministry. We are nowhere near that. I don't think anybody's even thinking about it right now, while they should. Whether we like it or not, government is the largest driver for demand in this sector or any sector that is very nascent. They will have to develop the sector to lend it maturity before it can fly on its own, right? You at least need another 10 to 15 years of government intervention for a minimum in India for this sector to grow and be able to meet the needs of people that require assistive technologies.
Thank you so much, Mohan, and to Pranav, Michelle, and Chris for a really interesting session for me to get multiple perspectives on this, in this emerging domain. And I'm sure the audience has many learnings and takeaways from this. Thank you so much. I think the Varija needs to be complimented for putting together such a diverse and interesting panel. And I think the Varija team has some mementos to present to each of the speakers.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Wonderful session.
And thanks to the Varija team for giving us this opportunity to be together on this panel.
Yeah,
I've learned very much.
A lot of good learning. Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, and bye-bye. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
audience, for great questions.
Thank you.